Having said that, it is here that we can begin looking at Dirge of Cerberus and how it stands up next to its more popular older brother. It would be wrong for me to judge the two games by RPG or shooter standards alone, since of course the two games aren't of the same genre, but I can look at the quality of the games and how they used the conventions of their separate styles to their fullest effects. I've already addressed the story, and it should come as no surprise that Final Fantasy VII's narrative is far superior to that of Dirge of Cerberus. However, it's a general rule of video games that RPGs are story-driven and therefore almost exclusively have the story market cornered over shooters. What I can say in Dirge of Cerberus' defense, though, is that it uses its 10 to 15 hours of shooter gameplay well, and paces the cutscenes that drive the plot forward with a quality that is to be expected of a company with a forte in making RPGs. In short, Dirge of Cerberus' plot, though much less complex than that of its predecessor, does live up to the Final Fantasy name, albeit in the sort of way that I can only say that it works just because the game is a third-person shooter. My primary complaint having to do with Dirge of Cerberus' short-lived story is the fact that this doesn't leave much room for character development. Granted, the game does make good use of some familiar faces from Final Fantasy VII, and thus spares us the frustration of having to get acquainted with an all-new cast. But at the same time, this makes the gamer focus more on the new characters introduced into the story, thus magnifying their assets while also emphasizing their shortcomings.
I have to admit, I wasn't myself back there. And I'm not letting you get away. Not this time.
Seriously, I've seen a lot of anime in my time. I've played a lot of video games that have come out of Japan. I've seen some of the most extreme and some of the worst that the Japanese could produce creatively with hairstyles and wardrobes, and this is perhaps one of the worst that I have ever seen. I mean, this is just one of the most ill-conceived outfits ever. It's like the lead character designer was drawing naughty pictures in his spare time, and somehow one of his twisted erotic fantasies got switched in for the actual design. I have attitude.
How about it? You want to try your luck?
Yeah, come on, bring it on, sis. Just don't come in on my blind side, okay? Dear lord, it's just painful to look at. Fortunately, the other original characters are a bit better done, the most notable of them being the Sviets, the deep ground special forces that serve as the villains of the game. There's Azul the Cerulean, whose body is nearly indestructible, Nero the Sable, who can manipulate pseudospace, Rosso the Crimson, with the power to show side butt in a game rated for teenagers, Vice the Immaculate, the leader of the bunch, and Shulk the plot device, who plays the role of flashback generator for Vincent throughout the game. As I mentioned before, there isn't much character development in terms of these original characters, and that's one of the game's truest shortcomings, especially when you consider that, in Final Fantasy VII, even some of the most seemingly incidental side characters were given their own story arcs. I mean, Dirge of Cerberus itself can be considered a grandiose story arc meant specifically for the side character of Vincent Valentine. The Sviets themselves are largely motiveless, it seems, all of them swearing allegiance to Vice, their leader, and enjoying shallow violence just for the sake that it's violent. What I do find interesting about these characters is that they each follow a certain pattern. First Vincent meets them without fighting them, then he meets up with them again and there's a monologue, and then they fight, and then, despite the fact that Vincent has shot them several times in the head, each of these bosses is able to dance around dramatically for 5 minutes while delivering one last monologue before finally kicking the bucket. Huh, now where have I seen that before?
I am Longshot. You cannot save me. I am a Kurd.
A Kurd? So that's why you're called Wolf.
I was born on a battlefield. Raised on a battlefield. Gunfire, sirens, and screams. They were my lullabies.
Oh, right, of course. Duh. Well, that's it for this week. Tune in next time and I'll continue going over the legacy of Final Fantasy VII. And hopefully I'll leave myself with enough time to hit Crisis Core. I really need to learn how to manage the time in my videos better.
Tell us if you want we run now. Please us if we want live forever.
震える指で赤い涙をなぞる
Truth is, I'm not a real scientist. Look, the lab coat just comes right off.